This is the Net Group Investments podcast, where we explore a variety of views and insights that investors care about.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Mansoor Naka, and joining me is Sunay de Villiers, my colleague who is passionate about understanding investor behavior. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of how small behavioral tweaks can have massive impacts on financial outcomes. This is a follow-up to a previous podcast with Nick Andrew, where we discussed the concept of advisors alpha and the significant value financial advisors can add to one's financial outcomes. Welcome, Sunay.
Thanks, Mansoor. It's great to be here.
Let's start with the idea that big problems don't always need big solutions. Can you share some examples of how small changes can lead to significant impacts?
So one of my favorite examples is definitely a study conducted in the US, where obesity is a problem, where they simply changed the order of fruit in the canteen in schools and found that it led to healthier eating choices. And this small, mostly free change made such a big difference, and it showed that achieving positive outcomes is often more achievable than what we think.
That's fascinating, and I love that, especially the part that's free. I mean, you don't have to spend money on making these changes. I think another example closer to home probably is Woolworths, moving the sweets away from where shoppers queue, which I think resulted in fewer impulse purchases. And I think, those of us with kids can probably relate. These
Yes.
real life stories.
Absolutely. The aisles of the sweets and were painful to walk through.
These real life stories really make these concepts feel more approachable. Now, let's talk about our autopilot mode. How can it lead us astray, especially in financial decisions?
Yeah, so our brains have two systems of thinking. System 1, which is fast and automatic, and then you have System 2, which is slow and deliberate. And System 1 is great for quick decisions. I mean, we make thousands of decisions a day without us even knowing. And if you had to make those decisions with your System 2, you would have been exhausted by 8 in the morning. But the problem with your autopilot is under time pressure or when faced with complex decisions, it can lead to subpar outcomes. And this is where financial advisors come in. I think they can play such an important role to ensure that us as clients or the investor engages the System 2 thinking for deliberate and slow thinking to get to a point where more rational and ultimately better decisions are taken.
That's a great point. Can you give us an example of how behavioral coaching then can make a difference in financial outcomes?
Sure. I mean, let's think of us as South African investors who's had to deal with a lot of uncertainty and pessimism over the last few years. So understandably, as a result, so many South Africans have been experiencing social anxiety. Their friends are making certain financial decisions, given the current information, given the current uncertainty, and it's tempting. It's tempting to follow the herd. And this is when calling your advisor is invaluable. Because at that moment of feeling social pressure, your advisor can provide the perspective that you need to make the right decision and help clients avoid making impulsive decisions based on effectively incomplete information.
So having the advisor there, essentially, being that sort of rational part of the brain and being deliberate about those things. So what can we do then to make better financial decisions?
Well, there's a few key strategies. You mentioned the word now, deliberate. I think the first thing to always keep in mind is to be deliberate with meetings. Don't get anchored on yesterday's news. Stick to the agenda, stick to the plan when reviewing your financial needs. Talk about the thing you said you were going to talk about. And then secondly, make sure you have the full perspective. Sometimes what you're seeing and hearing is just a small piece, or quite frankly, the most sensational piece of a much bigger picture. And then I think the last thing to be aware of is be careful how you frame things.
Those are excellent tips, Sunay. In terms of framing, saying an investment has a 30% chance of underperforming is the same as saying it has a 70% chance of outperforming. But the way it's received can be very different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hearing the word underperforming will definitely trigger some anxiety rather than the word outperforming.
Absolutely. Can you share some more examples of small behavioral changes that can have a big impact?
One example that I personally find helps a lot is setting up automatic savings like a monthly debit order. By automating your savings, you remove the temptation to spend the money, and it ensures that you're consistently putting money aside for the future. Another example is mental accounting. So this is where you allocate specific amounts of money for different purposes, such as groceries, entertainment, and savings. And these guidelines can help you stay within your bigger budget and avoid overspending. And then the other thing you can do is make small adjustments in your daily spending habits. For example, bring lunch to the office from home rather than eating out 3 or 4 or 5 times a week.
Those are great examples, and it's amazing how these small changes can lead to such significant outcomes. Now, let's put some numbers to this. Let's talk through a specific case study that illustrates the impact of behavioral coaching.
Certainly. Let's discuss a case study I recently looked at of John, who wanted to follow the herd and switch to a different, more conservative investment at the end of November in 2020. Now, at this point, we were still wearing masks and recovering from the COVID crash. There was a lot of anxiety in the air. However, his advisor reminded him to stick to the plan and stay true to the investment horizon of his preservation fund. This intervention saved John 313,000 Rand, which is 31% of his million Rand starting capital that he invested at the end of August 2014. So by not switching, John achieved an annual return of 8.3% over the 10-year period, whereas if he had switched, he would have only achieved 6.7% per year over the same 10-year period. So this intervention saved John 1.5% per year over 10 years.
That's a powerful example, and we know those numbers do compound over time. It really highlights the importance of having a financial advisor to provide guidance and prevent impulsive decisions. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I just want to end off with a reminder that small behavioral tweaks can lead to massive impacts. Partnering with a financial advisor can help you put checks and balances in place to ensure that you make informed and rational decisions.
Thank you, Sine, for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, remember that small changes can lead to big results.
This podcast is for marketing information only. The information contained in the podcast or video was for information purposes and does not constitute advice, recommendation, or an offer or solicitation to purchase or sell any funds or strategies to any person in any jurisdiction in which the offer, recommendation, or solicitation to purchase would be unlawful.